Greetings folks, I'm Anto and today we're going to be taking a look at Dungeondraft, the battle map maker from the makers of Wonderdraft. I've talked a lot about Wonderdraft on this channel, so it should come as no surprise that when the creator of Wonderdraft, Megasploot, announced the new battle map maker Dungeondraft, I was very excited. As soon as the software was announced, I knew that I had to get hold of a copy and dive in and have a play and share my thoughts with you, which is what we're going to be doing today, looking at the software, giving my overview, my review and my first thoughts, and talking over some of the features of Dungeondraft. What's more, I'm going to be giving away a copy of Dungeondraft. If you want to know how to get your hands on this copy, stick around to the end of the video for more details. But for now, let's dive straight in and get started. First things first, before we do dive in, you need to remember that this is the early release build of Dungeondraft. It is not nearly as polished as Wonderdraft is at this point, and similar to Wonderdraft, it'll go through a few months of testing, bug fixes, hot fixes, and asset releases before it goes to a full release. While it's in early access, the price is $20 US, and like Wonderdraft, once it comes out of early access, it's going to rise presumably to $30. Just like Wonderdraft, you can get a copy via Humble Bundle. I'll leave a link to it down in the description below, and that is where you'll access your exe file to run the software and where you'll update. At the time of recording, a Mac and Linux version isn't available. It's only a Windows piece of software for the time being, but down the line I'm sure other versions will become available, just like they did with Wonderdraft. Another thing to note is that as this software is so new, a lot of your antivirus software and the Windows Defender will probably flag it as a potential threat. If you get flagged by the Windows Defender, there's usually a little option for more info which you can click, and that'll give you the option to install. And if you're running another antivirus, just disable that while you're running the installer, and then it will install onto your machine just fine. So let's dive into Dungeondraft and see if it lives up to the legacy of its predecessor. Loading it up, we're met with the familiar Sploot logo, the little corgi all splayed out, just like we had in Wonderdraft. You can see that we've got the Dungeondraft logo, and the interface in general is reasonably similar to that of Wonderdraft. Heading up to the top, you've got several options. You've got your menu to edit your preferences, such as how often the program will autosave. You can edit the tags of different options available in the software, and then we've got new and open. So let's go ahead and make a new map, and you'll see that we're presented with this pop-up wizard. Now, Dungeondraft works a little bit differently to Wonderdraft. Instead of having a pixel size canvas by standard, instead it works off TV size. So you're going to have a few different presets for common TV sizes, especially common sizes for using as a tabletop for playing RPGs. At the moment, there is a 40 and 50 inch TV option, and then you can change the number of tiles within that space. We're going to leave everything as standard to start with, just so I can give you a good overview of the software. In this new map wizard, you'll also see that there is the Start with Map Wizard option. I'm going to go ahead and click that, and what this will do is it will allow us to randomly generate both dungeons and caves, which is one of Dungeondraft's really strong selling points. And then we'll be presented with our canvas. Now, if I just zoom out here, you can see that we have the canvas in this area. I can drag that around using the middle mouse wheel, hold control and the mouse wheel to zoom. And over here on the left, we have our map wizard. Now this is where we can choose between dungeon or cave and generate a ready set map with the layout all ready to go to start putting our assets in. Now this is excellent if you're going to be running random encounters or you need a really quick map. Let's use a cave as an example here. So we'll click down here on cave, and we can change a few of the options, such as the boundaries, how complex we want the cave. We'll turn that down a little bit, and how dense we want it. Let's turn that down a little bit as well. And then for floor options, we've got all sorts of different options here, such as wood, we've got stone, tiles, decorative tiles, grass and straw, carpets, different kinds of planks. We're going to stick with just plain stone for this, and then down here for our walls, we're going to choose the cobble walls just for that rustic look on our cave. So once we've chosen our options, we head down, click generate, and see what we get. And you can see that it will generate a cavern system or a dungeon based on the criteria that you've set. If I up the boundary and click generate again, up it again, you can see that it's always changing what we're presented with. This is excellent if you want to make, like I said, random encounter maps, but it's also a good starting point if you just want to save yourself some time. In the past, I've used the Donjon random map maker to create some maps for dungeons and the Underdark, and while those have been useful for getting something in front of the players really quickly, they've lacked a lot of the detail and a lot of the flair that you get from nicer maps. Now with Donjon, you can download the map information, load it into something like Dungeon Painter Studio, and then just reskin everything, but that's an extra step. One of the things I really like about Dungeondraft is that all that is built in, and it's all in that unified art style. For a lot of people, the art style is going to be one of the major draws or things that keeps you away from Dungeondraft. There are a huge number of assets and different options available in Dungeondraft, even on day one, but they're all in a very distinctive art style. If you're familiar with 2 Minute Tabletop, it's a very similar style to that, except drawn by Megasploot's wife, and everything in the program is in that art style. So if you love it, then you're going to have a whale of a time in Dungeondraft. If you don't love the art style, well, at the moment there's not a lot that you can do. Dungeondraft doesn't currently support custom assets, but it is something that will be coming in the future. And like Wonderdraft, I expect there will be quite a vast third-party market for assets once those become available. But once we've decided what we're going to do, what we're going to generate, we just need to hit the finish button. So I'll generate a couple more different ones. Let's make it a little less complex and a little less dense. Let's make it a bit more dense. There we go, that's better. This will do perfectly for our demonstration here. But once you've generated a cavern or a dungeon that you're happy with, just go down to the bottom here and click on finish, and that will place all of those details down on your map, and then you can start really getting into the meat of the program. So before we carry on, I want to show you just some of the basic features that you get in Dungeondraft. Over here on the left, you can see all of our tools. We have design, terrain, objects, effects, settings, and our select tool. If we dive into the design tool, you can see that I can place floors, walls, portals, and I have my cave brush. The cave brush is what I would use for this cavern map to expand areas, remove pieces. So if I click on that, you can see that I can use it to just change certain aspects. You'll see that as I was doing that, there was a little bit of stuttering. That is a currently known problem. The cave brush and the water brush currently have a few problems, but that is a known issue, and I'm sure it will be fixed probably by the time this video is live. I will leave a link to the Discord server where you can find out more information on what is currently known to be a bug, what is being fixed, and get all the latest news on Dungeondraft down in the comments below. So within the design tool, we can use the cave brush to change our map with caves, or we can go in and use the floor tool, and let's just make a room here. So let's say in this cavern it's been excavated and a room has been made. We can really quickly draw that in. And if we want to change it, that's really easy too. We have several different shape options, including square, oval, and polygon. So if we grab our polygon tool here, we can really quickly change the shape of our buildings, and it changes dynamically. So all of the floors here, these are using what's called in the app smart floors, and they change based on the shape of the room. It makes adding and changing and adjusting rooms really quickly. If I click on this edit points option here, I can then go in and I can drag and change things within the shape of the room, and it will automatically adjust. Clicking down on the wall tool, you can place walls independently without having to build a room. You have all the same wall options as you have with the floor tool, and you can also set them to be over or under existing objects. So if we grab a cobble wall here, we can make another smaller room within that room we've already made, and we can change where the walls appear, whether they appear above or below existing walls. And then the portal tool allows us to place our doors and windows. If we go and grab this door here, this iron bar looking door, we can move it around and place it, and maybe we've got a jail cell here. If you want to turn the snap into the grid on or off, that's all done down here at the bottom. There's this little wizard here that allows us to change the zoom level of our map, to change what level we're on the map, and we'll come to that a little bit later. And it allows us to toggle the grid and toggle snap to grid. So if we turn off snap to grid and then choose a door of some sort, we can place that either anchored to our walls, or if we click here to freestanding, we can place a door anywhere we want. Just above that, you'll see there is a block light option. This is currently bugged and doesn't work in the initial release, but seeing as though it is currently an hour and a half after it's been released, chances are by the time this goes live, that will also have been hotfixed. But what that will do is, with the light tools that are available in the program, it will allow light to pass through the door or be blocked by it. So that's how we place our rooms. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go down to our terrain tool, and we're just going to run through some of those terrain brushes. So if I click here, we've got the option for terrain gravel. Now these will place down outside of the bounds of your buildings and of your caverns. It's a really nice way to fill some of those negative spaces, particularly in caverns. And you have all sorts of options. If I click here, I can change what particular terrain I want to use. So let's say terrain void, that's cool. I can suddenly put the entire map into space, which is really cool. But we're going to change that back to dirt, and then we've got these few other options down here. We choose the gravel one, and we can just draw in these negative spaces with gravel. Now that could be a pit your players could come across, and there could be pits down to gravel, or that could just be a way for you to fill in some of those zones. Next up, we have the water brush. This works somewhat similarly to the cavern brush. You can change the size of your brush, and then you can either brush your water on, or you can use shapes to fill in a space really quickly. And then you've got several different options for your colors, both for deep water and shallow water colors. I really like the more blue tones, so let's choose a size and go in, and we'll just paint some water in. You can see that before I release the mouse, it shows up as yellow, just to show you where your water's going to be, and then when you release, it becomes water. At the moment, if you do a really large section of water, it can cause the program to freeze and stutter, but again, that is a known issue. The program's only been out for a few hours at the time of recording. One of the things I like most about Dungeondraft is you can see that the water is ever so slightly animated. This isn't something that you can export at the moment, so you couldn't bring an animated map into another program. Say you were playing via Roll20. At the moment, you can't bring this animated into Roll20, but if you're using Wonderdraft to cast to a projector, or if you play at a table with a TV as your playmat, you can bring up the animated water, and that is an option just to add a little more life into your maps. And you've got all sorts of options with objects to place them below the water to really enhance the look of that animated water. Similarly, with our material brush, that works very much like the water tool. You have a variety of different options that you can paint in, and you can change where you want to place them. So let's say we want one of these areas here. We want this to be lava. Well, we can select it to be below the ground, fill it in, and we suddenly have a lava pit. It's that simple. The layer adjustment and selection in Dungeondraft is a major bonus. It is really easy to place things exactly where you want them. You can see here, if I expand the menu, I have several options set as default. For the material brush, for example, I have below ground, which lets me do what I've just done with the lava, place it below the caverns so it looks like it's recessed below them. I can place it below water, so if I wanted some kind of material to be beneath that pond that I've put there, I could do that. And then I can choose several different layers if I wanted it to be within the cavern and not underneath. And then next we have the path tool. Again, we can choose what layers we want that to be, whether we want it to appear under or over other assets. And we've got our three different options: our wooden fence, which we can curve around just like the path tool in Wonderdraft and double click to place, or we can place one of the different rail options either with or without sleepers, and that works just the same. You click and drag and change, and it will change direction based on what you want to do and where you want to put it. Which brings us to the biggest area of any battle map making software, the object assets. Now, Dungeondraft has a couple of different options in this regard. You have the object tool, which allows you to place individual assets, and then you have the scatter tool. Now, the scatter tool lets you select a group of objects and place them randomly, cycling through them. This is a really great way to place things like trees and other ground assets really quickly. So let's go into the object tool and I'll show you some of the options that are available. So you can see here on the right, once we open up our object tool, on the right we have all of our different options, and on the left we have our different controls. We can change the rotation, the scale, the color for any custom colored elements of our objects. If you're familiar with Wonderdraft, this will be something that is really familiar to you. Objects have different regions that can be colored. In this right pane, they're a bright red. So anything that's a bright red can be changed in the color options. So if I just grab this cloth here as an example, by default it's got this rather desaturated red, but if I click on here I can add a new color and I can bump up the saturation and make it neon green or any other color that I want, or I can select from the preloaded, pre-generated colors to make things fit stylistically. One option you're going to find really handy here is the tags for the objects. There are a lot of objects in Dungeondraft, a surprising number given the fact that the software is only a few hours old, and these tags are going to really help you speed through your selection. So let's say I'm making a map in the Underdark using a cavern. Well, I can click on the cave tag and it'll give me all sorts of options for rocks and crystals, gold piles and things like that. Or I can click up here and I have several different options for areas that have got predefined sets. So if I choose tavern, it will select a certain group of these tags and present them all. So it makes making the maps for these regions really, really easy. I can click dungeon and boom, I've got everything that I would probably want to put into a dungeon already loaded for me, and it eliminates the need to scroll through hundreds upon hundreds of assets. I've only been playing with the software for a few hours at this point, and already I can see this being one of my favorite small quality of life tools, because having to scroll through the sheer number of assets that there are available can be a little overwhelming. If I click all here, you can see that there are a lot of assets in Dungeondraft. I mean, I have to talk at length about all sorts of things in a William Shatner voice just to get through half of the things that are available in Dungeondraft. So without the tags, it can be a little overwhelming and you forget where things are placed. But with the tags, I can select what I want to make a map of, say a dungeon, and boom, it's all there. So as I said, the object tool will allow you to place individual objects, but if we go over to the scatter tool, I can select multiples. To do this, I click on the first object that I want to place and then hold shift and click on the last, and it will select the entire group. And what it will do is it will randomize which of these selected assets it places, and it will randomize the rotation. So if I just start placing them down, if I turn off the grid and turn off snapping to make it a little easier for you to see, it'll start placing all of these various rocks. And you can do this for absolutely every single asset available in Dungeondraft. And this is another small quality of life thing that makes making these maps go so quickly. Next, we want to take a look at the effects tool. Now this is probably my favorite tool in Dungeondraft, and I think it'll become pretty clear why. So what I want to do first is show you the environment tool. Now what this does is it places a transparent colored filter over the entire map. So you see here we've got ambient light as an option. I click that white bar and I get a color wheel. And what I can do is I can change that, and it changes the tone and applies a color mask, a transparent color mask over our entire dungeon. So if I go and choose a blue tone and then just darken it right the way down, then maybe this is a nighttime cave scene. But if we zoom out, that looks kind of boring just as it is. We need something to make it more visually interesting, and the way we do that is with lights. So we come to the light tool, and you can see here that I can place points of light that I can change the range for, so I can make them much larger, or I can change the intensity to make them much more bright, or lower it down and lower the size to make a much softer light. And straight away I think you'll see why this is one of my favorite tools, because it interacts with the objects in the world. The walls of buildings, the standalone walls and the cavern walls all block light, so that you get these really nice lighting effects from it. And the lighting tool and the ambient light allow you to get a lot more versatility out of your maps. You could have a daytime map, and with only a few clicks you could turn that day map into a night map. Change the ambient lighting and add a few directional lights or spotlights, and you've got an entirely different looking map. One of the other cool things about the light tool is that you can change the colors. So if I click green, I could place it here in this prison room, and then it could turn into a magical vault. Or if I find an area of the map, say there's a point of egress here, I could change the range and up the intensity and place it right on the end there, and you can see that it puts out this really bright beam of light that could represent something in your game and make your map look much more visually interesting. Similarly, if I choose like a white light, I could place it there, and that could be an exit into the outside world and could let the players know that that is how they need to escape from this cavern. There are a lot of different options that you can play around with your lights to make different kinds of scenes, and you can also have them interact with objects. So if I go into the object tool and let's go into all and just scroll down a little bit, I can grab a campfire, place that down, and then grab my light tool and select a nice warm campfire like light, and let's just up the range a little bit to get some of those nice shafts of light. Place that down, and immediately you can see that there's a campfire in the map, and it's casting light in a way that looks realistic and makes sense to your eye. And then finally we have the settings options. If I click here, the very top one is map settings, and that allows us to change the color of the grid. If I click the grid back on, we can make the grid different colors, change it. We can even go in, add our own colors, change the opacity of the grid so it barely shows up, all those good options. But then we also have a camera filter. Now, this is another area where I think that Dungeondraft is gonna make making your maps and getting them in front of your players so much easier. Let's say you've made a really cool looking map, you intend to run it in a virtual tabletop or via a projector, but for some reason you end up needing to print it out, and you look at it and you think, oh well, this looks amazing, but I'm never going to be able to print that. Well, using the camera filter, you can select the print friendly option, and it will give you a grayscale version, complete with the lighting effects if you want them. And I love this. I think it's going to make so many interesting maps, both to be able to print out, but also for some really old school looking D&D maps that used to be in black and white. This sorts that you can make a version in color and really easily make a old school version of it as well. You can also choose sepia, which just applies the sepia tone to the whole thing, gives it that old world feel. This is really useful if you want to make some in-world encounter maps. Let's say your players arrive at a dungeon and someone says, oh, a previous adventurer has been there and mapped some of it out. Well, you can just throw this sepia filter on and that could be the map that your players receive. One of the things that you want if you're making maps using something like Dungeondraft is the ability to use levels, and Dungeondraft has all of that built right in. So I'll show you really quickly how you can use that to best effect. So if we go up to design and use our floor shape tool to really quickly just make a building, you can see I can place down a floor, but then I can go into another level, and you can see here if I go down to the settings and then level settings, I have several different levels. We start always with the ground level, and I can create a level here and I can call it just level 1 and click switch to level on creation. I hit that and I've made a new level. Now what I can do is I can quickly switch between them straight away, and I have this compare levels option. What that does is it makes a transparent layer that I have options for changing that transparency on the current level and on the reference layer, just so I can see what the layer below or above looks like. So we'll click here and you can see that that gives me a view of the level beneath, and then I can go in and I can make a second floor. So I'll grab the polygon tool again and we'll this time make just a simple square. And what that does is it separates our map out, and when it comes time to exporting our map, we go up here, we click on export, and we can change which levels we want to export. We can choose whether or not we want to overlay any different levels. So if we wanted to export an image with both of our levels showing, we could do that. Or if we just want to show the current level, we can do that as well. We can also mess around with our opacity and get them to show both, like how we see it when we're in the map, but for the most part you just want to export one level at a time. And the benefit of this is that when you're playing in a virtual tabletop or on a TV or projector, you have everything nice and lined up, so you don't need to move your tokens and you don't need to move your minis. You can just place the new map straight in and everything will be all lined up. Here you can see a map I made earlier. It's the map I used to just get myself familiar with all of the tools in Dungeondraft, and it's just depicting a little fireside camp scene on the edge of a lake in some snowy terrain. This took me all told maybe 20 minutes, if that, and most of that time really was getting to know the different options and figuring out where the different assets were placed. But like I said, it's really easy to make multiple versions of your maps. I started out by making this a night version, but with only a few clicks I was able to transform it into a day version, and then by applying the print friendly option I made an old school D&D style version of the map. One known bug at the moment is with exporting. If you export at higher resolutions, higher pixel counts, there are some strange artifacts where each individual asset gets a white box around it, but that is a known bug, and hopefully by the time you're watching this, if not a little bit after, it will be fixed. But for now, exporting at the lower sort of 50-70 pixels around the Roll20 preset works just fine. So we click on export and that brings up our options, and here in grid presets we can change the pixel density. So if we choose Roll20, it'll change it to 70 pixels, and that exports mostly fine. You get very few artifacts from that at the minute. Overall, I'm thrilled with the software as it is, but there is a lot of promising stuff yet to come. Megasploot, the creator of both Wonderdraft and Dungeondraft, has said that they plan on releasing a lot of assets for this over the coming months. I believe it's been said that they plan on releasing monthly assets with the aim of releasing a few thousand assets over the course of the next year to really bulk up what's currently being offered. And that will make Dungeondraft able to handle basically any type of map that you want to throw at it. The only downside to this is that the art style will all be very much like Dungeondraft's base art style. I happen to really like it, but if you don't like that art style, well, you're kind of stuck until the custom assets are made available. But like I said, that is something that is coming, and like Wonderdraft, once it's available, there will be a large range of third-party assets available to use. Overall, I think Dungeondraft has instantly become my go-to mapping software. In this early stage, there are still a lot of bugs and crashes and weird export artifacts, but given that it's only been released for a couple hours as of the time of filming, that is to be expected. This is an early access piece of software, so you expect there to be some issues. But those issues aside, the core of the program, the base functionality, the assets, the things that it does really, really well. I've used a lot of different mapping and battle mapping softwares over the years, and either they have the problem that the user interface is really ugly and really difficult to use, which is the case for Dungeon Painter Studio, or they are a subscription-based service which kind of hurts your wallet in the long term, or they just have really limited assets. Whereas Dungeondraft has a really slick UI. It is a one-time payment, it is a local program on your machine, you don't have to rely on the internet or the cloud, and the art assets are all nice and uniform and everything looks great together. The addition of the random generator for dungeons and caverns is a real cherry on top. One of the things that I like doing the least and probably spend the most amount of time on in relation to all other aspects of being a dungeon master is looking for good encounter maps, and hopefully Dungeondraft is just going to eliminate that problem. You need a map for an encounter in the middle of a forest road, well, grab your scatter tool and all the trees and just put some trees down, grab your terrain brush, draw in your path, and you're good to go. If you need a cavern for the Underdark, generate a random cavern, throw on an ambient light filter and some lighting effects, and you are ready to go. If you need a dungeon for a quick one-shot dungeon delve, you can randomly generate the dungeon, change the rooms with the room tool, and then place in all of your different objects based on the tagging system. I think that this is going to become the standout go-to dungeon mapping software in the same way that Wonderdraft has become, in my opinion, the absolute best region and world map making software. I'm super excited for the future of Dungeondraft, but I also want you to be excited too. I want you to get the chance to build the maps that you want to make. So I'm going to be giving away a copy of Dungeondraft. All you have to do to enter into the giveaway is be a subscriber to the Icarus Games channel and then post down below and let me know what the first map that you would make using Dungeondraft is. You don't need to share the video to be in with a chance to win, but I would really appreciate it if you shared this video around with other dungeon masters or world builders, anyone that you think might benefit from this software, or even if you don't think they might benefit but they just might think it's cool. I'd really appreciate it if you share the video around, and also hit that like button because it helps tell YouTube that these videos are worth showing to people. But again, to enter into that giveaway, all you need to do is to be a subscriber to this channel and leave a comment below letting me know what the first map that you plan on making is, and then I'll go through all of those comments and I will pick a winner sometime next week. Keep an eye out in the pinned comments for more information on when I'll announce the winner. You can expect to see a lot more Dungeondraft videos in the future, but until next time, happy gaming! Thanks for watching. If you're new here and you like what you see, hit that subscribe button. I release a new RPG, tabletop and world building related content every single week. And if you enjoy what I do here and want to help the channel grow, consider supporting me on Patreon. And if you want to keep watching, I've got another couple videos over there. But until next time, happy gaming.